Good morning to all our families out there joining us, folks. Great to have you joining me this morning for our short little family service here at New Church Live. And kids, you know what we're talking about today? We're talking about this. Everyone has something. Everyone has something. And kids, what I'm gonna ask you is if you could say those words with me. So if you can say it with me, please do that. Everyone has something. What does that mean? Everyone has something. Well, I was listening to this great story, kids, and it was this story about this dad and his son. And his son all of a sudden had a really serious medical thing, something called epilepsy, where he had what's called a seizure. And a seizure is where your brain kind of gets way too active. And kids, maybe just do this with your hands. Your brain just fires way too much and it impacts your body. Maybe some of you may even have a family member, you may struggle a little bit with that, or maybe your parents do. And so he knew that his son was struggling like that. And his son had a really hard time because what his son thought is he said, "Oh, this makes me so different than everyone. How can I ever be normal because I have this thing that I'm going to have with me my whole life?" And what does his dad remind him? And I love this because I think it's the same thing that the Lord would say to, and I think he'd say it with a smile. Everyone has something. Everyone has something. All of us have something in there that just doesn't quite work the way we might like it to. You know what it is for me, kids? I'm really bad with numbers. I'm constantly taking this number and flipping them. I take this set of numbers and this set of numbers and flip them. Even yesterday, and I do this all the time, I set this set of numbers for an address, and then I had this set of numbers for the address, and I sent it, and I realized I gave the person the wrong address because I'd flipped all the numbers around. So I needed to go back and tell them, like, "Oops, my apologies, I got the numbers all wrong." Really, really struggle with that. And there's other parts too. Like for many parts of us physically, we may have a couple of things that just don't quite work right. Sometimes kids, right, you can see that. I'm sure you've seen friends, you have family members who've used a wheelchair. Sometimes you can see it, but a lot of the time you can't. It may be things that you don't know, like someone who maybe is hard of hearing or maybe doesn't see quite as well as other people or maybe doesn't have as good a balance as someone else does. All these things are part of life, and all of us have them. Some of more than others, some in ways we can see, some in ways we cannot, but we all have it. And there's this beautiful line in the Bible. It's a little short line, a little short story, and it's about this disciple. His name is Paul, and he's traveling around the world. Kids, maybe we can do this big circle. He's traveling around the world because he wants to tell everybody about the Lord. And part of his travels is he writes letters to tell people about sort of what he's found in the Christian faith. And one of the things he says is that he said, "Oh, and by the way, I have a thorn in my flesh." Now, what he means is he doesn't mean like literally he had a thorn. Like we've all had a thorn in our hand or a thorn in our arms or our legs. He's talking about the fact that he had a disability. That was a figure of speech, as they would say. So he had a disability that he had to walk through life with. Here's this big, powerful, very popular guy. And what does he do? And he says, I struggle too. I have something wrong with me. My life is not perfect, and I'm not perfect. My body's not perfect. And you can just imagine how many more people this enabled him to reach. Because when we talk that way, when we talk about the fact that we're not perfect, it allows, ready for this, kids, it allows other people to not be perfect too, which is everybody. That simple. It allows other people to be imperfect too. And who's all imperfect? Everybody. So, kids, just this week, just two things. Number one, remember that if you have something that just doesn't quite work right, just know it's just the way life sometimes is. And all of us have that something. All of us have that something. And we just accept it and we keep moving forward. We do the best, very best we can in lives that are oftentimes are not just exactly perfect. I will probably never get the numbers exactly right, but I've learned how to work with that and to try to do better and better every year with it. And the second part of it, kids, to remember. So that's our work. It's just to accept that, yeah, there's things we have that are not perfect, and we have to accept them in ourselves. And I think you know what I'm going to say. The number two is when we learn to accept it in ourselves, then we learn to accept it in other people. We accept it in our families. We accept it with our siblings, with our parents, with our grandparents. And then we start to expand that out to accept it in our friends and our schools and with everybody. Because, folks, remember, everyone has something. Everyone has something. So that's my thought for today, kids, and I hope that makes a lot of sense to you. For the parents who are watching with you today, or grandparents or whoever's watching with you, this is what I would love to invite those parents to. Today we have a church service focused on community support for families struggling with addiction. So you are more than welcome to join that. It's a very special service today at 10:30. You're welcome to join us in person or to join us online. So, with that, let's say a little prayer and then we'll get ready for a great week ahead. So, kids, join me in a little prayer. Lord, thank you for your presence here today. Thank you for helping us to understand the imperfections of life and to be accepting of those imperfections. And not only accepting, but maybe in some way, Lord, to embrace them, to know that we ourselves are imperfect and to know that other people are too, and that somehow when we acknowledge that, we can all come together. Thank you for being with us today. Hear our prayer. Our Father, who art in the heavens, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven, so upon the earth. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you, bring you peace, and bring you home. Amen. All right, kids, have a great week, and we'll see you next Sunday. Bye-bye.